I used to think that betrayal would sound like a gunshot. I thought it would be a loud, violent that would shatter the windows of my life, leaving glass everywhere, unmistakable and sharp. I imagined screaming matches, thrown vases, the kind of dramatic unraveling you see in movies. But that isn't how it happens. Not really. Betrayal is quiet. It is the silence of a phone turned face down on the dinner table. It is the slight hesitation before a kiss. It is the gradual, almost imperceptible shift in the air pressure of your home, until one day you realize you are suffocating, and you don't even know who turned off the oxygen. My name is Clara. I am 26 years old, and until 6 months ago, I thought I was living the prologue to a perfect life. I live in Barcelona, in the El Born district. If you know the city, you know exactly the kind of romance I am talking about. Our apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that smelled of old stone and damp earth, with a balcony that looked out over a labyrinth of narrow streets. In the summer, the humidity clings to your skin like a second layer of clothing, and the sound of tourists and church bells from Santa Maria del Mar drifts through the open windows until dawn. I lived there with Mark. We had been together for 4 years, living together for 2. Mark was an architect, charming, ambitious, with the kind of effortless charisma that made waiters give us the best table and clients sign contracts without reading the fine print. I worked as a freelance graphic designer, mostly branding for boutique hotels and cafes. We were a team. Or so I told myself. We were the golden couple of our friend group. We hosted dinner parties where we served cheap wine that tasted expensive because we poured it into crystal glasses I had inherited from my grandmother. We had a plan. We were saving for a bigger place in Example. We were building a life, brick by brick. But while I was building, Mark was quietly digging a tunnel underneath the foundation. The first sign wasn't a lipstick stain or a smell of perfume. It was an energy. It was Lucia. Lucia was a new project manager at Mark's firm. She was older than me, maybe 30 or 32. She was sharp, angular, and radiated a kind of aggressive competence that I initially admired. She didn't dress in the flowy, bohemian style that I preferred. She wore structured suits and heels that clicked loudly on the pavement. She's brilliant, Mark told me one night over dinner. He was picking at his risotto, more interested in his phone than the food I had spent 2 hours cooking. She actually understands the vision. Most of the PMs just care about the budget, but Lucia, she gets the art of it. That's great, I said, pouring him more wine. It must be nice to have someone on your side for once. I was happy for him. I was naive. I didn't see the way his eyes lit up when her name appeared on his screen. I didn't notice that late nights at the office started to coincide with the days she was in the studio. I trusted him. I trusted him because I loved him, and because I believed that we were the same person, just in 2 different bodies. I thought our loyalty was a fixed point in the universe, immutable as gravity. The shift happened slowly. Mark stopped asking about my day. He stopped touching the small of my back when we walked down the street. He started critiquing things he used to love. He told me my laugh was too loud in public. He made a face when I wore my favorite yellow dress, asking if I didn't have something more professional for dinner with his colleagues. And then there were the dinners. The firm had a lot of social events. I usually enjoyed them, playing the supportive partner, charming his boss. But suddenly, the dynamic changed. At a rooftop party in May, I watched them. Mark and Lucia. They were standing by the railing, overlooking the city lights. They weren't touching. They were standing a respectable distance apart. But their bodies were angled toward each other, like magnetic needles finding north. They were in a bubble of private amusement, laughing at jokes I couldn't hear. When I walked up to them, the laughter stopped abruptly. "Clara," Mark said, his voice tight. "We were just discussing the Diagonal Mar project." It sounded funny for a building project, I said, forcing a smile. Lucia looked at me. Her eyes were dark and assessing. She didn't look at me with jealousy. She looked at me with pity. That was worse. She looked at me like I was a child who had wandered into a room where the adults were speaking. "Architecture has its absurdities," Lucia said smoothly. Her voice was like smoke. "Mark has a wonderful eye for detail. He was just telling me about your quaint little apartment." Quaint. The word hung in the air. I looked at Mark. He didn't defend our home. He didn't say, "We love it." He looked at his shoes and took a sip of his drink. "It's temporary," Mark mumbled. "We're looking for something more modern." That night, we walked home in silence. I asked him if something was going on. I asked him why he felt the need to diminish our life in front of her. "You're being paranoid," he snapped, unlocking the heavy wooden door of our building. "She's a senior manager, Clara. I have to impress her. Why do you always have to make everything about your insecurities?" There it was. The gaslighting, the seed of doubt planted in my brain. Maybe I am insecure, I thought. Maybe I am holding him back. I apologized. I apologized for feeling pain when he stabbed me. That is what love does to you when it starts to curdle. It makes you apologize for your own bleeding. The summer in Barcelona is intense. The heat creates a haze that blurs the edges of reality. For 2 months, I lived in that haze. I tried to be better. I dressed sharper. I asked intelligent questions about his work. I tried to be the woman I thought he wanted, the woman Lucia was. But no matter how hard I tried, the distance between us grew. He was physically there, sleeping in our bed, eating the breakfast I made, but he was gone. The revelation came in August. It was the week of the Gurdsia festival. The streets were decorated with colorful paper mache, and there was music everywhere. Mark told me he had to go to a conference in Madrid for the weekend. "Networking," he said. "Lucia is going, and the partners. It's mandatory." I helped him pack. I ironed his shirts. I kissed him goodbye at the door and told him to knock him dead. He left his iPad. It was sitting on the coffee table, buried under a stack of Architectural Digest magazines. He never went anywhere without it, but in his rush, he had taken his laptop and forgotten the tablet. I didn't open it immediately. I stared at it for a long time. I knew the passcode. It was his birthday. I also knew that opening. It was a crossing of the Rubicon. If I looked, I would find something. I knew it in my gut. And if I found something, the quaint life I loved would be over. I poured myself a glass of wine. My hands were shaking. I sat on the sofa, the sounds of the festival drifting in from the street. Drums, laughter, life happening outside while mine paused on a precipice. I typed in the code. 1205. It unlocked. I didn't have to dig deep. It wasn't hidden. It was in the photos. His photo stream was synced with his phone, and his phone was currently in Madrid. Or so I thought. The most recent photo was taken 2 hours ago. It wasn't Madrid. It was a selfie. Mark and Lucia. They were in a car, sunglasses on, smiling wide, conspiratorial smiles. The background wasn't the highway to the capital. It was the winding coastal road of the Costa Brava. I scrolled. There were hundreds of them. Mark and Lucia at a dinner I wasn't invited to. Mark and Lucia in our apartment. My apartment. Taken on a day I was visiting my mother in Girona. She was sitting in my favorite armchair, drinking from my grandmother's crystal glass. And then the screenshots. Screenshots of text messages. Mark, she's so exhausting. I feel like I'm babysitting when I'm home. Lucia, be patient, darling. Once you get the promotion, we can stop pretending. You need her stability for now. The partner's like a family man. For Mark, I know, but I miss you. Living with her is like living in black and white. You're technicolor. I read until my eyes burned. I read about how boring I was. I read about how they laughed at my design work, calling it cute but amateur. I read their plans. They were waiting for October. In October, Mark was up for a junior partnership. Once he secured it, using a portfolio that I'd helped him organize, using the social capital I've had built for him with his boss's wife. He was going to leave me. He was going to break the lease, leave me with the deposit issues, and move in with Lucia in a loft in Poblano. I put the iPad down. I didn't cry. That was the strangest part. I didn't shed a single tear. Instead, I felt a coldness spread through my chest, freezing my heart into a block of ice. It was a clarity I had never experienced before. He thought I was weak. He thought I was black and white. He thought I was a stepping stone he could stand on to reach the next level and then kick away into the water. He was wrong. I looked around the apartment. I looked at the art on the walls, my art. I looked at the rugs I had restored. I looked at the life I had curated for us. He didn't create this lifestyle. He consumed it. Without me, Mark was just a man in a suit with a credit card, debt he hid from everyone but me. I had 3 days before he came back. 3 days to fall apart. No. 3 days to rewrite the ending of his story. I didn't want to scream at him. Screaming is messy. Screaming gives him the satisfaction of seeing me broken. He would tell Lucia, "See, she's crazy. I had to leave." I wouldn't give them that narrative. I wanted something else. I wanted him to understand, truly understand, what it meant to live without me. I wanted the silence to be louder than any scream. The first thing I did was financial. I didn't steal his money. I wasn't a thief. I simply separated ours. We had a joint account for household expenses, which I contributed 70% to because my freelance work had been going well, while he was paying off student loans, which I now realized was mostly dinners with Lucia. I withdrew every cent that was mine. I canceled the automatic transfers. I removed my name from the utility bills. Then, I looked at his career. Mark was an architect, yes, but he was terrible at the administrative side. He couldn't write a proposal to save his life. For the last 2 years, I had ghostwritten every pitch, every bio, every project description. I had designed his portfolio layouts. I had managed his LinkedIn. I logged into his cloud drive. I didn't delete his files. That would be petty vandalism. Instead, I simply reverted them. I reverted his upcoming presentation for the junior partnership to the draft he had written before I fixed it. The one with the typos. The one with the flat, uninspiring language. The one that sounded arrogant and confusing. I turned off the auto sync so he wouldn't notice until he opened it on the server at work. Then, I reached out to his boss's wife, Elena. We were friends. We went to yoga together. Mark thought she liked him. She didn't. She tolerated him because she adored me. I invited her for coffee on Saturday morning. "Clara, you look tired," she said, touching my hand across the table. "I am," I said, looking down. "I think Mark and I are ending things, Elena." Her eyes widened. "What? Why? You two are perfect." "He's found someone else," I said quietly. "Lucia, from the office." From Lena's face hardened. She knew Lucia. That shark. "They've been together for months," I said, letting a single tear fall now. It wasn't fake, but it was time. "He's planning to leave me after he gets the partnership. He says he needs the promotion to afford his new life with her." Elena didn't say anything for a long moment. She just stirred her coffee. "I see," she said. "He thinks the partnership is a done deal." "Seems to think so," I said. "He's very confident." "Interesting," Elena said. "My husband values loyalty above everything, Clara. You know that. It's the ethos of the firm." We didn't speak more about it. We talked about yoga, but I saw a look in her eyes. I had planted a seed. Not a lie, a truth. I simply ensured the light hit it at the right angle. Sunday came. I packed. I didn't pack everything. I packed only what was undeniably mine. My clothes, my books, the espresso machine, the good towels, the art. When I was done, the apartment looked like a skeleton. It echoed. It was just furniture and dust. It looked exactly like Mark's soul. I found a new apartment that afternoon. A studio in Garcia. Smaller, cheaper, but mine. I signed the lease immediately. When Mark came home on Sunday evening, I was sitting on the balcony, drinking the last of the wine. The apartment was dark behind me. He walked in, sunburnt and smelling of guilt and sea salt. "Hey," he called out. "I'm back." Madrid was exhausting. The traffic, wow. He stopped when he walked into the living room and realized the rug was gone. He looked around. He saw the empty bookshelves. He saw the boxes stacked by the door. He walked out to the balcony. He looked at me, confusion warring with panic on his face. "Clara, what's going on? Are we painting?" I looked at him. I looked at the man I had loved for 4 years. He looked small. "I saw the photos, Mark," I said. My voice was calm, conversational. He froze. "What photos?" "The Costa Brava. The texts, the plan for October." I took a sip of wine. "I decided to save you the trouble of waiting. You don't have to pretend anymore. You're free." "Lo, Clara." "Wait," he started, the architect of lies trying to build a bridge over a canyon that was already too wide. "It's not what you think. She's just a colleague. We were working." "Stop," I said. "Just stop. It's embarrassing, for you." I stood up. "I'm leaving. The lease is in your name, remember? You insisted on it for your credit rating. Rent is due on Tuesday. The electricity bill is on the counter. Oh, and I took the espresso machine. You never learned how to clean it anyway. You can't just leave," he stammered. We have a life." "We had a life," I corrected. "You have a plan. Good luck with it." I walked past him. He tried to grab my arm. "Clara, please. Let's talk. I can explain." It meant nothing. It meant everything, I said. It meant you are a liar. And I don't live with liars. I walked out the door. I walked down the 3 flights of stairs. I got into the taxi that was waiting with my boxes. As we drove away, I looked up at the balcony. He was standing there, gripping the railing, looking down. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trapdoor. The first month was hard. I missed the routine. I missed the smell of him, even if that smell now turned my stomach. But I held my ground. I blocked his number. I blocked Lucia. I focused on my work. Then, the quiet karma began to unfold. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to watch from the periphery. Barcelona is a small village disguised as a city. Word travels. 2 weeks after I left, I ran into a mutual friend, Jordi. He's a mess, Clara, Jordi told me over coffee. He didn't know how to pay the internet bill. It got cut off while he was on a Zoom call with a client. I took a sip of my cappuccino. That's unfortunate. And the apartment. It's a pigsty. He tried to get a roommate to cover your half of the rent. But the landlord found out and threatened to evict him for subletting without permission. He always was bad with contracts. I noted. But the real blow came in October. The partnership announcement. I heard it from Alana, the boss's wife. She sent me a text. Just a simple, justice is served. Let's get drinks soon. I found out the details later. Mark had presented his portfolio, the one I had reverted. He hadn't checked it. He was so arrogant, so sure of my invisible labor, that he had walked into the boardroom with a presentation full of typos, generic stock photos, and a bio that I hadn't polished. It was embarrassing, amateur, but that wasn't the nail in the coffin. The nail was the family man image. The partners were conservative. They valued stability. When it came out, subtly, through whispers that may or may not have started with Elena, that Mark had imploded his long-term relationship to have an affair with a subordinate. The trustworthiness factor evaporated. They didn't fire him. That would be too dramatic. They just passed him over. They gave the junior partnership to a guy named David, who was boring but reliable. And Lucia. This was the part I hadn't calculated, but the universe did it for me. Lucia was ambitious. She didn't love Mark. She loved the idea of Mark. She loved the rising star, the future partner, the man with the stylish apartment and the perfect domestic support system. When that system collapsed, when Mark became a stressed, broke man living in a dirty apartment with a stalled career, Lucia did the math. She dumped him. She requested a transfer to the Madrid office for professional growth. She left him alone in the wreckage of the life he had destroyed to be with her. It has been 6 months. I walked past a cafe in Elborn yesterday. It was raining, a soft, gray drizzle that makes the cobblestones shine like obsidian. I was meeting a new client. I felt good. I felt light. I saw him. He was sitting at a small table near the window. He was alone. He looked older. His shoulders were slumped. He was staring at a laptop, frowning. He looked like a man trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing. He looked up and saw me through the glass. For a second, the world stopped. He half rose from his chair. His eyes widened. There was a desperate hope in them. A plea. He looked at me like a drowning man looks at a lifeboat. He mouthed my name. A Clara. I looked at him. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel hate. I felt nothing. It was the most beautiful feeling in the world. It was the feeling of a wound that has healed into a scar, tougher than the skin around it, insensitive to the touch. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I simply adjusted my umbrella, turned my head, and kept walking. I walked toward my new studio, toward my new life, leaving him behind the glass. He was trapped in the blurry, distorted reflection of his own choices. And I was out here, in the rain, finally, completely clean. The best revenge wasn't ruining him. He did that himself. The best revenge was realizing that I didn't need to witness it to be happy. I just needed to keep walking.